Hi, back again. I'm going to do a short video now that's not part of the Creative Technology Toolkit module, but it's associated with it, and we're looking at how to use openFrameworks C++ Toolkit. Here I'm working on a Mac, and I just want to talk today briefly about classes, how you can use them, and how they can simplify thinking about your code and make things a lot more flexible. So I'm not going to go in depth, I'm just going to give a very fast introduction, and I'm going to live code it, so I'll probably make lots of mistakes. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to where I've installed openFrameworks, and I'm going to use the project generator to make a new empty project. So this is the first time I'm running it on Mac OS X. It's just asking me to confirm where the root of my openFrameworks install is. I tell it what it is, and I want to create a new project. So I'm going to call this class example. I'm not going to include any add-ons, and I just want it to generate. And what it'll do is it'll make a simple folder structure and put in my source code files that I need, and then I can go in and populate them. This has made a folder for me inside the apps, my apps folder. You can see here's our class example, and helpfully it can offer to open this up in the IDE. Here I'm using Xcode. You may be using Visual Studio Code or any of a number of other IDEs depending upon what your platform is. So it's made me a new example project. I have a header file and a CPP file, and it's including, if I open up the window a little bit here, a whole range of common things that openFrameworks might allow me to do. Actually, I don't need most of these, so I'm going to get rid of these just for clarity and delete them from my header file so they're not declared. And then in my CPP main file, I'm going to get rid of them as well. So it's much simplified. I've got a setup, an update, a draw, and in case I want to add some key presses, I've kept them in. If I wanted to add mouse, listeners, etc., I can always put them back in at a later time. The thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start off declaring a class. And a class is not an object in itself. It's like a factory that makes objects. So if you can think of it as a blueprint for a car or a cat or a bird or a dragonfly, it would then allow you to say, okay, you know how to make a car. Make me a new car with a specific registration, and then the class or the factory that makes the car would know the basic things that that car can do and the basic things the car is made up of. What we're going to do here is do a really, really simple example. So I'm going to say I want to declare a new class, and I'm going to call this a class of box. And then I declare my class, semicolon at the end. And inside here, in a class, you can have things that only the class is allowed to find out about, and also things that the public are allowed to find out about. And this can help set things up if you've got lots of complicated stuff inside, to make sure that people only ask the class or the object to do things in a particular way. In our instance here, we're going to make everything public. So I just say these are public, and it means that any part of the application can come in and ask for these variables and also set them. The first thing that I want to do is I want to make a width and a height for my box. So this is going to describe a box that I'm going to draw onto the screen, and then I'm going to draw lots of them to the screen. So I'm going to declare an integer, and the box is going to have a width, and I'm going to declare another integer, which is going to have a height, and I'm going to declare where this box could be drawn on screen. So I'm going to declare an integer, and I'm just going to call this the X position, and I'm going to declare another integer, and the Y position. Now, I could go in and tidy these things up by making a point variable and do a lot of sort of optimization, but this makes it a lot clearer. So I can have a box object with a width and a height and an X and a Y position on the screen, and what I want also to do is to have a color. So I can set OF color. So what I'm doing is I'm declaring here the things that the box can have inside itself, the properties that it can have when I make one. So I can make a box, a width and a height, an X and a Y position for where it's going to be drawn, and a color. And that's the end of my description. What I can do is I can also add things that the box can do. And one of the things that I want the box to know how to do is how to draw itself. So I can set a function or a method that this box can have, so the box can know how to draw itself. If it were a dragonfly or a cow, maybe it would know how to eat, how to fly, how to land, a whole range of different things. In this instance, I'm just going to say that I want it to be able to draw, and like any function, it needs to decide whether it's going to return a variable or not. In this case, I'm just going to say void. When I ask it to draw, it's not going to give me any answer back. And I want it to draw, and it's not going to receive any parameters. It's just an instruction to draw. So when I now say the name of my box and dot draw, it'll do whatever it defined in the function draw. So that's the end of my header. And if I come into, so there's one more thing I'm actually going to do. What is supposed to be good practice, I understand from people that are actually good programmers that tell me, is that you make a constructor and a destructor. So when I instantiate a new box, there's a whole function that is dedicated the minute it gets constructed, and also to be clean when the box gets removed from memory. There may be things that you want to do to release memory, to release a link to a video camera, etc. And I can put them in explicitly. So I want to say that I want a box constructor, and then to indicate the destructor I use the tilde character. And because these are constructors and destructors, they don't return any variable. They don't return any value. So they're just called as a function on their own. So these two here called as functions on their own for when I make the constructor. Put a comment to remind me. Constructor. Destructor. Maybe spelled correctly. So these are things that my box can do. I'm going to come into my CPP file and now declare how these things work. So just for neatness, I'm going to copy this useful comment separator. And the first thing that I'm going to do is call one of the things that the box can do. And it can make a box. And this is my constructor. And I also have a box, and then the tilde symbol, the squiggle symbol, box destructor. Now we're not actually going to use a box destructor, but it's there as an example of what apparently people tell me is good coding practice. Now the other thing that my box can do, if we have a look at that header file, is there's a function here to draw. So we're going to write that in as well. So this is the thing that the box knows how to do, which is draw. And inside these, I'll set up my routines. My apologies. Box draw returns nothing, but needs to have a void declaration to say that it does. But the constructor and the destructor are special in that they don't return any value. Now, in my constructor, I'm going to say, what do I need to do when I build a box? The first thing that I need to do is have a look at the header file. Well, we've got a width, a height, an X and a Y, and a color here. So I'm going to set them up. So if I say width, now they've already been declared in the header file, so now openFrameworks understands that there's a variable called width that will be relevant inside the box, and I'm going to say the box width equals 20 pixels, and the height equals 20 pixels, and the X position is going to be, and I'm going to use the openFrameworks random command, which I love, just use it for everything. And this is going to choose a random number either between two values, if I pass it two values, or between 0 and whatever the maximum value is. And I'm going to find out the width of the screen that I'm running by using OF get width, and make a random number between 0 and whatever OF get width, remember, returns. And then I'm going to do exactly the same for the Y value, OF random, OF get height. So this will get the height of the screen. And then I just want to say my color. And I'm going to set color. And one of the things that color can do is I can set the color, and it wants a red and a green and a blue value. And again, I'm going to use my friend OF random to say OF random. Colors in RGB here run between 0 and 255. And I'm just going to put that in 255 OF random 255 OF random 255. So it'll choose a random red value, a random green value, and a random blue value. And I've constructed a box. So I fulfill these things that a box knows how to be. All I need to do now is say, well, what happens when I ask a box to draw itself? How should it do that? Well, I will use the OF draw rectangle and pass it a width and a height and an X and a Y value. So it wants to know where to start drawing, which will be X and the Y at a width and a height for that individual box. And what I'm also going to do to make sure it draws in our color, I'm going to say OF set color to be the value inside color. So these values, color, X, Y, width, and height, refer to a specific box. When we say to box name Fred or whatever we might call the new box, we will say, Fred, please draw yourself. It will look inside this function that it knows how to do, set a color based upon its color inside itself, and also the width and the height and the X and the Y, which is great. Now, we can make one box and make a name and tell it to draw. So we could say, make a new box, please, by saying box and then the name of the box. But what we're going to do is we're going to make a lot of boxes. So I'm going to come to my header file and I want to make a vector, and the vector has to be a particular kind of class. And now that openFrameworks knows I want to make box, and I'm going to call this list or vector list of lots and lots of objects, boxes. I hope I haven't run into trouble with using the name box because I didn't double check this and I'm freestyling here. But the vector will be a list of these objects. So it'll be a list of boxes, and the boxes inside them will understand their own width and their height and their color and how to draw themselves. So in the setup, I now want to make some boxes. So I'm going to set up a variable, an integer called max boxes, and then I'm going to make a loop, and inside the loop I'm going to loop the number of max boxes and build a load of boxes. So max boxes is 100, and I'm going to say for integer I is 0, so we start at 0 and we keep going until I I is less than max boxes, and then I++, so we'll increase I every time we go through the loop. And here I want to make a box type called new box. So openFrameworks and Xcode is recognizing that box is now a new kind of object that it can make. And I'm going to make a new one called new box. It'll implicitly run this constructor, give it a width and a height and an X and a Y position, set a color. And then I'm going to push this into my list of boxes. So I'm going to say boxes, and this vector, one of the things that I can do is push back, and it says stick this new object at the end of the list, and the list gets a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to push new box onto that. So every time this loop runs, 100 times now, because it'll go to max boxes, it makes a new box and pushes it onto the list of boxes. The reason that I'm not sticking 100 in here is just a programming practice to try and get rid of what people call magic numbers. Here I can see implicitly that I've got a variable called max boxes and I know what it's doing, rather than finding random numbers that I've poked in, which is my hacker approach to doing things, trying to be a little bit tighter and make easier to read code. So now this should start and make me 100 boxes. And all I need to do is, after I made these 100 boxes, is get them to draw themselves to the screen. So in the draw loop, I'll say for integer I starting at 0 and keep looping through. And what I want to do is find out how many boxes there are. And I could ask max boxes, but I'm going to explicitly look at the thing that I want to draw. So I'll go to boxes and say, find out what the size of you is, please. And then I++. So this will loop through with I being starting at 1, starting at 0, and then all the way up through the amount of boxes inside the list called boxes. I should have named this something slightly better. And then I'm just going to say boxes, and if I use square brackets and I, implicitly what I'm saying is I'm referring to the object in the slot at position I in the vector list of boxes, and I'm going to tell that thing that's in that position what to do, and in this instance I'm going to tell it to draw itself. Because in the header file we specified that a box knows how to draw itself, we're sending the command draw to that individual box that's in that position in the list of boxes, and all being well, this should draw itself, and it will run this routine here. So now, when I compile and run my code for the first time, it should define the new class, box, build a vector called boxes, make 100 boxes and put them into the vector, and then draw them to the screen, which is done, which is very, very cool. And you can see each box has a width and a height and an individual position that it knows about and an individual color that it knows about itself and a way to draw itself, which is great. Now, I could have done this a bunch of different ways in a slightly cruder process without needing to make a class. But the great thing now is if I want less boxes, I just come here to max boxes, make them and run them. Here it's just going to make one box for me. So let this compile again, and there it is. Or if I want 1,000 boxes, let's go mad, let's have 10,000 boxes. It just loops through and makes me 10,000 boxes and puts them into my boxes vector, which is great. It could be, now actually, I want to add something. And I want to change one of the abilities of my class. I don't need to go and change the rest of my program because I'm just referring to these boxes as implicit objects that know about themselves. I'm going to reduce the amount of boxes there back to 100 or so. And what I want to do is I want to add an extra ability. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to say void that a box knows how to wobble. So I make a new method or function thing that it can do. It knows how to wobble. And now if I go to my C++ file, I'll define what wobble is. I'll say void wobble. And in the wobble, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say find out the location you're at and move a little bit randomly from there. Or no, I think I'm going to change the width and the height so they just sit in one place and wobble. So here I'm going to say x equals of random, and this time I'm going to say two values, and previously we were saying the width and the height was 20. We're going to say they can be between 15 and 25. Sorry, the width, not the x. So now we're randomly going to set the width of a box got to declare that this is a method the box knows how to do. And then we're going to set that height equals of random, again between 15 and 25. So when we ask a box to wobble, it'll change its width and its height. Let me just fix that a little bit there. So we've now got this method declared. And I'm going to say on update, let's make the boxes wobble all the time. So again, like we did in our draw loop, we're going to say loop through all the boxes. And this time we're going to say boxes in the list, wherever we are in the box list, number I. And as you can see, Xcode's picked that up from the header file. The boxes know how to wobble. So we'll just send this command to wobble to each of the boxes on the update. And if I run that now, compiling my code. So now what we've got is a box that knows how to construct itself with its width, its height, and its X and Y position, and a color for itself. It knows how to draw itself to the screen. And it's got this additional thing called wobble. We haven't added more into our main program other than to say, please tell the boxes to wobble. The main program doesn't know what that means, but it knows that the box understands it. And we've put into the box what it means to wobble. Now, at this point, I could come back and go, actually, it would be great to make them change their color as well. So we can go, without changing any of the rest of our program, we can add a new thing that wobble does. It doesn't matter how we call it. It just matters that the box knows how to do something when it's requested to do it. So we will say that color equals, I'm going to do exactly the same. Copy from up here and just set yourself to be a new random color. So we build and run our application, and there we have 1,000 boxes wobbling. And I come back and increase that. You can see slightly simplistic, but we've been able to make a factory or a class for an object, make 1,000 of them, and then go through and update what that object does because it knows about itself. So that's one of the really cool things about being able to use classes, to segment your code and to break down and say, is this something that I'm going to use many of, that I need to define on its own? And it allows you to start thinking structurally about your program and not worrying about the syntax itself. So I hope that's been useful. There's a lot more information about classes and correct ways to do it properly. But this maybe hopefully is a little bit of an introduction, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time on another video.